My name's Aaron. I'm 35 now. I met Megan when I was 27, and she was 26. We were both living in Chicago at the time. I was working IT at a mid-size insurance company, and she was in client services at a design agency 2 floors above mine. We met at a shared building coffee stand. Of all places, I offered to pay for her drink when she forgot her wallet. She refused, then came back the next day with a fresh one for me as thanks. We got to talking after that. Casual at first, then longer lunches, a couple of after-work drinks. The kind of slow start that turns into something more before you even realize it's happening. Megan was magnetic. She had that kind of energy where people just naturally looked at her when she entered a room. But she wasn't flashy. She was smart, organized, and could make anyone feel like they were the only person in the conversation. I was quieter, more technical-minded, but she brought me out of my shell in a way that didn't feel forced. We clicked. Early on, I noticed we worked well together, whether we were figuring out weekend plans or building a bookshelf from scratch. We didn't step on each other's space. Things just flowed. After about 2 years of dating, I proposed on a weekend trip to Galena. Nothing over the top, just a rented cabin, snow falling, and a quiet moment where it felt like the right time. She said yes with tears in her eyes and threw her arms around me. That memory stuck with me. It felt easy, natural, the way it's supposed to be. We got married a year later. Small ceremony, backyard setup at her parents' place, a few dozen friends and family. I remember the way she looked that day, not just beautiful, but totally calm. Like she knew exactly who she was and exactly what we were doing. I never once felt unsure. After the wedding, we bought a house in the suburbs. Nothing huge, a cozy, clean 3-bedroom with a backyard, close to both our offices. We spent weekends furnishing it together, picking out everything from rugs to drawer handles. Megan had a better eye for style, but she always asked for my input. She liked things simple and functional, and the place ended up feeling like both of us. We fell into our routines easily. I'd be up early for work, always the coffee maker and a packed lunch ready before she came downstairs. She started working freelance from home a year into our marriage, building websites and branding packages for small businesses. She was good at what she did, organized, reliable, creative. We'd eat dinner together most nights, take the dog for a walk, sometimes binge a show, or have friends over on weekends. It was steady, comfortable, ours. My younger brother Tyler visited often. He'd always been part of my life. We grew up close, and he'd swing by for dinner or just to hang out. Megan and Tyler got along well. Honestly, I liked that. It felt like our little circle was solid, like all the parts of my life were in sync. Looking back, those years felt full. Not perfect, no life is, but real, grounded, and full of little joys we didn't even notice at the time. I wouldn't have changed a thing. Not then. Our life found a rhythm pretty quickly after we moved into the house. It was the kind of rhythm you don't really notice until you look back and realize how tightly it all fit together. We'd wake up at different times, me first, always. I'm the early riser, the quiet type who likes the house still and dark for a while. Megan liked to sleep in a little, especially after she started working from home. I'd leave her a mug of coffee on the counter, and by the time I came back in the evenings, the house would smell like a candle or something cooking, and she'd be sitting in the office with her laptop open and music playing low in the background. Weekdays were for work. I managed a small IT team by then, and most of my days were packed: calls, troubleshooting, coordinating vendors, putting out fires. Megan worked with a mix of small business clients, branding, design, social strategy. She built up a decent roster over a couple of years. She had this clean, minimal design style that a lot of clients really loved. I respected that about her. She never waited for permission to build something on her own terms. Evenings were quieter. We cooked together most nights, or she'd order takeout if I was late. Megan had a thing for Thai food and could eat spicy dishes I wouldn't touch. She teased me about it every time. "Come on, Aaron, you're not really sweating from 2 bites, are you?" We had a way of joking through the day, winding each other down without even thinking about it. Some couples argue about the little stuff: dishes, laundry, what to watch, but for us, that was always easy. We gave each other space, and we shared the load. That's just how we worked. Weekends were a mix of projects and downtime. I'm a fix-it guy, so there was always something to tinker with: a loose cabinet hinge, the garage light, a new coat of paint for the guest room. Megan loved making mood boards for whatever room she wanted to change next, and I usually let her run with it. Sometimes we'd host friends, low-key dinners, game nights, nothing big. Other times we just grab coffee and walk the dog around the neighborhood. We talked about taking a road trip down the coast or maybe flying out west to visit her cousin in Oregon. Those plans stayed loose, like a promise we didn't need to rush. Megan was great with people. She could hold a conversation with just about anyone and make it look effortless. I'm more reserved, but she always made room for me in social settings, pulled me into things without making it awkward. We balanced each other out that way. Where I was quiet, she had momentum. Where she ran ahead, I steadied the pace. Tyler was around now and then. He and Megan got along, they shared a dry sense of humor, and he'd crash on our couch after the occasional night out or a weekend project. He was a couple of years younger than me, ran his own contracting business, and he'd always been good with his hands. I'd help him with his website or his invoices from time to time. It felt good to have him close. Honestly, things felt solid. We didn't have drama. We didn't keep secrets. And if you'd asked me at the time, I would have said, with no hesitation, that Megan was my person, that we were building something that would last, and that everything we were doing, the house, the routines, the quiet moments, was just the beginning. Looking back now, it's strange how easy those days were, how smooth the surface of our life looked when you weren't digging for anything underneath it. Our routines weren't glamorous, but they were ours. I think we both liked it that way. There was a simplicity to how we moved through each week, a kind of shared understanding that didn't need to be spoken aloud. Megan and I had gotten good at the little things. She handled grocery lists, appointment reminders, and kept the social calendar organized without missing a beat. I was the one who checked the air filters, remembered to take the garbage out, and made sure the car got serviced on time. We didn't split tasks down the middle, but it always felt even. I never felt like I was carrying more than she was, and if I ever did, it never lasted. She'd notice and balance it out. That was one of the things I used to really admire, how tuned in she was when it came to us. We had this shared whiteboard calendar in the hallway that Megan updated every Sunday. She loved the act of filling in the week, even if we didn't have much planned. She'd draw little notes or write reminders in different colors. Pick up wine for dinner with Kelsey, or don't forget, Lawn Guy Thursday at 10. It sounds like a small thing, but those tiny habits kept us connected. They made the house feel like a space we were building together, not just cohabiting. Megan still worked from her home office, and she'd come out around lunch most days, grab something from the fridge, and sit with me at the counter if I was working from home too. We'd talk about her clients, my team, little things that didn't seem important at the time but kept us tethered. Sometimes she'd show me new branding ideas, logos she was experimenting with, or vent about clients who couldn't make up their minds. I always told her she had a gift for translating chaos into something clean. She'd roll her eyes and say, "You're just saying that because you like the colors I pick." There were weekend getaways here and there, a cabin in Wisconsin, a few nights at a bed and breakfast near the lake. Nothing big, but meaningful in their own way. We weren't chasing some dream of luxury. We were building something slower, steadier. I liked that. Megan did too, or so I thought. Tyler stayed a regular fixture in our lives. He and I still talked often, mostly about work, sometimes about growing up, stuff we laughed about as kids. He came by with tools when I needed help on bigger projects around the house. Megan always offered to cook for him, and the three of us had dinners together often. There was an ease to it, or at least it felt that way. Tyler was my brother. I never felt a need to guard that relationship, and Megan never gave me a reason to. By our third year of marriage, we had started to talk seriously about starting a family. Nothing rushed. Just the kind of conversations people have when things feel settled. We'd both grown up in households with siblings, and there was a quiet hope, at least on my end, that we'd one day pass some of that on. We were in a good place. I believed that with everything I had. The news came on a Tuesday morning. I'd gotten up early like usual, already halfway through my second cup of coffee and sorting through emails when Megan came downstairs barefoot, still in one of my old t-shirts. She looked different. Not nervous, exactly, just focused. She held something behind her back and didn't say anything at first. Then she placed it on the kitchen counter. It was a pregnancy test. 2 pink lines. I just stared at it for a second, then at her. "Are you serious?" I asked. She nodded once, and I wrapped my arms around her so tightly she laughed into my shoulder. It wasn't planned, not exactly. But it wasn't a surprise either. We talked about it, played with the idea, and stopped being careful a few months before. Still, there's a difference between talking and seeing the thing made real in front of you. The next 9 months moved fast and slow at the same time. Megan threw herself into every detail. She researched strollers like she was writing a consumer report. She painted the nursery herself, one wall at a time, until it matched the exact shade of sage green she'd pictured. She had a list for everything: hospital bags, car seat safety ratings, meal plans. I mostly stood beside her and helped where I could. She liked control, and I trusted her with it. Tyler was around a lot during the pregnancy. He helped install the crib, ran errands when I was working late, even came with us to a baby supply store when Megan wanted a second opinion on rocking chairs. I remember thinking how lucky I was to have both of them in my life, people I could count on, people who showed up. It didn't even cross my mind to feel anything other than grateful. When our son was born, everything changed in that huge, irreversible way that people always say it will. We named him Jacob. 8 pounds, wide-eyed, and somehow familiar from the moment I saw him. Holding him for the first time was like everything in my life snapped into a new alignment. Like this was the thing I was always moving toward. The first few weeks were a blur: sleepless nights, bottle rotations, diaper changes at 3 a.m. Megan was amazing through it. Exhausted, yes, but steady. She never lost her footing. She took to motherhood like she'd been waiting for it. I was in awe of her, honestly. We were a team, even in the chaos. Family came in and out. My parents, hers, friends dropping off meals. Tyler visited often, always eager to hold the baby, always with a new joke about Uncle of the Year material. Jacob responded to him, smiled at his voice, kicked his feet when he walked in. At the time, it felt sweet. Now, well, that's a thought for later. Those first few months with Jacob were some of the best of my life. I was tired, yes, constantly worried I was doing something wrong. But I'd come home from work, and there they'd be, Megan with the baby on her chest, a quiet hum in the background, the house glowing with that kind of peace I didn't know you could feel just from being near the people you love. At least, that's what I thought. They say that having a baby changes everything, that it rewires your routines, your priorities, your sense of self. And I expected all of that. The sleepless nights, the dropped conversations, the quiet drift away from spontaneity. What I didn't expect was how lonely it would feel, even when I was never technically alone. At first, I chalked it up to exhaustion. Megan and I were both wiped, passing Jacob back and forth like clockwork. She was still technically on maternity leave, though she'd started dabbling in client work again by month 4. I could see her slipping back into her rhythm: emails, Zoom calls, half-finished branding decks open on her screen while the baby napped in the bassinet beside her. She looked like herself, or close to it, but I didn't feel like us anymore. It started small. A conversation that trailed off without conclusion. A glance that didn't linger the way it used to. Megan stopped laughing at my dumb jokes, not in a dramatic way, just in a way that said her mind was somewhere else. She'd still smile, still say, "You're ridiculous," but it felt automated, like muscle memory. She started going out more, nothing strange on the surface. A couple of walks alone to clear her head. Quick errands that took longer than they used to. Coffee meetups with her friend Claire. Or at least that's what she said. She deserved breaks, of course. No one should expect a new mother to stay in a loop of diapers and dishes. But I couldn't help noticing how much she seemed to need space from me. Tyler came around more, too. Still helpful. Still friendly. Still Uncle Tyler. But I noticed how often he'd text Megan directly now to check in or see if she needed anything. Sometimes he'd show up with groceries we didn't ask for, or drop by in the middle of the day when he knew I was at work. She'd act surprised, but not that surprised. When I asked about it, she'd shrug. He just wanted to see the baby. Don't be weird. And I wasn't being weird, not really. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to be the paranoid husband keeping score. But something in my gut started to tighten. It wasn't jealousy. It was confusion. Things felt off. The house was the same. The routine was the same. But the energy in the air, that quiet hum we used to live inside together, was gone. Or maybe I was just imagining that. I wanted to be imagining that. One night, around 11 p.m., I walked into the kitchen for a glass of water and saw her phone lighting up on the counter. She was upstairs putting Jacob to sleep. The message preview said, "Miss you today." No name. Just those 3 words. I didn't touch the phone. I didn't need to. Because a good man doesn't snoop. A good husband trusts. And I was still trying to be both. Even though some part of me, the part that hadn't let go of anything yet, was quietly bracing for impact. The thing no one tells you about suspicion is that it doesn't hit you like a lightning bolt. It doesn't scream or shout. It settles into the quiet spaces, in a skip beat, a pause too long, A conversation that used to come easily but now feels like crossing a river. That's where I was living. Somewhere between denial and a truth I couldn't name. Megan and I still shared the same roof, the same responsibilities, the same schedule. But that shared rhythm we once had? Gone. Everything felt slightly misaligned. Like we were performing the routine of our life without any of the music underneath. I started feeling more like a visitor than a husband, especially at night. She used to fall asleep next to me, curled toward me, breathing even and steady. Now she turned away more often than not. She'd stay up scrolling, reading, sometimes working, always just a little longer. When I'd ask if everything was okay, she'd always give the same answer. I'm just tired. And maybe she was. Maybe we both were. But the tiredness I was feeling didn't come from sleep. It came from the strain of pretending nothing had changed. Jacob was growing fast, already crawling, babbling, recognizing our faces. I adored him. Holding him grounded me in a way nothing else did. He'd reach for my beard, giggle when I made ridiculous noises, fall asleep against my chest like he knew I'd never let him go. That bond felt unshakable. But sometimes, when I looked at him, I couldn't ignore a quiet thought that would sneak in from the back of my mind. He doesn't really look like me. I hated myself for thinking it. It made me feel shallow, insecure. But the thought wouldn't leave. People said he looked like Megan, and sure, I could see that, the eyes, maybe. But his expressions, his hair, even his mannerisms, sometimes they reminded me more of someone else. Someone closer than I wanted to admit. I started seeing Tyler differently, too. Not because of anything he did, not directly. He still showed up. Still acted like the same brother I'd grown up with. But there was something about the way he and Megan talked when I wasn't in the room. I'd walk in, and they'd go quiet, or change the subject. It didn't happen every time, just enough to notice. Just enough to feel it. I told myself I was overthinking it. That the pressure of new parenthood was messing with my head. That being tired made things look worse than they were. I still had no reason, no proof, no clear moment that gave me any right to question my wife or my brother. Just the sense that the lines had started to blur while I wasn't looking. One night, Megan was in the kitchen after putting Jacob down. I came in behind her, meaning to ask if she wanted tea, and she jumped. Not dramatically, just a quick, startled look like I'd caught her doing something she shouldn't. Her phone was in her hand. She slid it into her back pocket before turning around and smiling. "You scared me," she said. "I thought you were asleep." I didn't ask what she was doing. I just said, "Didn't mean to sneak up on you." She kissed my cheek, almost automatically, and went back to wiping the counter. And me? I went upstairs. I laid in bed staring at the ceiling. And for the first time since Jacob was born, I felt completely alone in my marriage. There's a kind of doubt that lives under your skin, not loud, not dramatic, just constant. A low hum that you can't turn off. It doesn't shout, "She's lying." It just whispers, "Something's off." And that whisper, if you hear it enough, starts to shape the way you see everything. That's where I was living, in the gray space between trust and suspicion, hoping I was just tired, or stressed, or imagining things that weren't really there. But I couldn't unsee it anymore. The distance. The way Megan avoided eye contact when I asked simple questions. The quick glances between her and Tyler at family get-togethers. The way she always seemed to have a reason not to be fully present, not to linger in a moment with me the way she used to. And worst of all, the thought I kept pushing down, trying not to let take root, was Jacob. My son. Or the boy I'd been raising as my son. I hated myself every time I thought it, but it came anyway. His eyes, his face, the way people said, "He looks just like someone," and didn't finish the sentence. It wasn't just the lack of resemblance. It was how easily Megan dismissed the subject every time I mentioned it. "He has your calmness," she'd say, or "Baby's changed so much, he'll look more like you when he's older." Always just enough to quiet the question without ever actually answering it. But something in her tone felt prepared, like she'd rehearsed it. One night, after she fell asleep on the couch, I sat at the dining table with my laptop. The house was quiet except for the hum of the fridge and the soft creak of the floorboards under Toby's paws. I searched how to order a home DNA test. Not out of anger. Not out of revenge. Just because I couldn't go another week, maybe another day, living with a question that had started eating away at everything good I used to believe in. I ordered the kit under a new email account. Had it shipped to my office. I waited 3 days to open it. Every time I saw the box sitting in my desk drawer, I felt like a traitor. A man who didn't trust his wife. A father who didn't trust the face of the boy who smiled when he walked through the door. But I had to know. Because this, all of this, was twisting me up inside. I couldn't focus at work. I barely slept. I kept running mental circles around the same thoughts. And the only way out was forward. When Megan was out grocery shopping the following weekend, I took the sample from Jacob while he was napping. Just a swab of the inside of his cheek, gently done, just like the instructions said. He didn't even stir. I stood over his crib afterward, watching him sleep, the softness of his breath, the small curl of his fingers. And I felt two things at once, love and fear. I loved him, no matter what. But I was terrified of what that envelope might eventually say. I dropped the sample in the return mail and sat in my car for a full 15 minutes afterward, staring out at the grocery store parking lot. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel clarity. I felt like a man who had just broken something sacred, even if it was the only thing keeping him sane. I didn't tell Megan. I didn't tell anyone. Because if I was wrong, I'd carry that shame quietly. And if I was right? Well, I wasn't ready for what that would mean. The results came on a Thursday afternoon. It had been 12 days since I mailed the sample. I tracked it obsessively, checking the status every morning before work and again at night when Megan was asleep. In those 12 days, I told myself 100 times that I hoped I was wrong, that I wanted the results to embarrass me, to make me feel guilty, to prove that love, not logic, had the final say. I wanted to be humbled. Instead, I was gutted. The email came in just before 2 p.m., during a quiet lull at the office. I saw the notification pop up on my burner email. My heart started pounding before I even opened the browser. I hesitated with the cursor hovering over the subject line for a full minute before I finally clicked through. The report was clear. Probability of paternity, 0%. I read it once. Then again. Then again. The words didn't change. There was no wiggle room. No ambiguity. According to the science, the child I had held, fed, protected, loved, the boy who called me Dada and reached for me in the dark, was not biologically mine. I sat completely still. No rage. No sobbing. Just silence. Something in me shut down. Like a switch flipped off that I didn't even know existed. My body felt disconnected from my brain, as if it was happening to someone else. But it wasn't. It was me. This was my life. My wife. My child. My brother. Because in that moment, even before any confession, before any confrontation, I knew exactly who the father was. There was only one possibility. Tyler. I didn't need a second test. I didn't need more questions. I just sat there in the brittle, frozen silence of that office chair and let it settle in. They lied to me. Not just once. Not in a way that could be walked back. But deeply. Repeatedly. With planning. With silence. With intention. And worst of all, they let me love him. They let me think he was mine. They watched me build my life around a lie and said nothing. Not a blink. Not a flinch. They watched me fall in love with that little boy and smiled every time I said he had my laugh or my nose. And they let it happen. I drove home on autopilot. The roads passed by in a blur. I parked in the driveway and stared at the front door of my house, feeling like a stranger looking in from the outside. Jacob's stroller was on the porch. A baby bottle sat on the windowsill. The blinds were tilted just the way Megan liked them. Inside that house was a life I thought I understood. A family I thought was real. A woman I thought I knew. A brother I thought I trusted. And all of it, had been shattered by one email and a few strands of DNA. I didn't go inside right away. I sat in the car until the sun started to set. And I made a decision. Tomorrow, everything would change. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room in the dark, the DNA report printed and folded on the coffee table like a loaded weapon. I could hear the soft clicks of the baby monitor, the occasional creak of the floor upstairs where Megan was walking Jacob back and forth to sleep. That used to be a comforting sound, the background hum of a home being lived in, of a family moving in rhythm. Now, every step above my head felt like a lie tapping out its confession, over and over, across the ceiling. In the morning, I waited. I let her move through the routine as if it were any other day. She came downstairs with Jacob on her hip, humming something tuneless, her hair tied back the way she wore it when she wanted to feel put together but didn't have time to try. She handed him to me like always. He just had a bottle. He might fall back asleep. I nodded, took him, and looked into his face. Those bright, curious eyes, that little half-smile. I kissed his forehead. I whispered, "I'm sorry." Then I carried him upstairs, laid him down in his crib, and closed the door behind me. When I came back down, Megan was in the kitchen rinsing a coffee mug. She looked up and smiled like she always did. You're up early. Everything okay? I didn't answer right away. I just walked over to the table, picked up the folded paper, and placed it between us. What's this? She asked, still smiling, though I watched the smile falter. Open it, I said. She hesitated. Then, slowly, she dried her hands and sat down. She unfolded the paper and read it. Her eyes moved across the page once. Then again. Then she stopped moving at all. Her fingers clenched slightly at the edges. She didn't look up. She didn't speak. I already know, I said quietly. Don't lie. Still silence. Eventually, she whispered, Aaron, don't. My voice was calm, but my hands were shaking. Don't waste one more word pretending. She opened her mouth again, maybe to apologize, maybe to spin something. I didn't wait. I walked upstairs, grabbed the overnight bag she used when she visited her mother, and started filling it. Clothes, makeup, toiletries. I didn't even ask what she wanted. I packed what she'd need for a while and set it by the front door. Then I went to the bedroom closet, pulled out the rest of her things, jackets, shoes, gifts I'd bought her, and threw them out the window, one armful at a time, into the yard. She followed me out, panicked now. Aaron, stop, what are you doing? We need to talk about this. No, we don't. But Jacob is not my son. That shut her up. Her face crumbled, but I felt nothing. No pity, no softness, just a cold, clear boundary that I should have drawn months ago. I took her car keys off the hook. The car was in my name. So was the house. The bank account. I left her nothing but the bag and the baby. I handed her the bag. You're not staying here. Neither of you are. Her eyes widened. You're kicking us out. He's just a baby, Aaron. No, he's your son. You and my brother. She broke then. The first time I'd ever seen her actually break. It was a mistake. It was only once. I don't care. I walked inside and closed the door. Then I got to work. I called my parents. Her parents. Every sibling, cousin, aunt, and friend that mattered. I told them what she did. I told them what Tyler did. Some were shocked. Others were silent. But the message was clear. They would hear it from me, or they'd hear a twisted version later. I wasn't hiding it. Then I went after Tyler's business. I had years of paperwork, receipts, invoices, project summaries I helped him put together. I knew his operation. I knew what corners he cut, what tax filings he forgot to process. I handed everything to a CPA and reported the discrepancies. Quietly, formally. Within a week, his accounts were flagged. His licenses were suspended. A month later, his business was under review. Neither of them could reach me. I changed my number, blocked them on everything. My house was quiet again. Still, but this time it was mine. And when I looked around, at the wreckage of what used to be a family, I didn't feel like a man who'd lost everything. I felt like a man who finally stopped pretending. It's strange how quiet a house can get after everything breaks. In the first few days, it felt like walking through the shell of someone else's life. Toys still in the corner, bottles in the kitchen sink, a drawer that used to hold her hair ties, now sitting hollow and clean. The silence wasn't peaceful at first. It was jarring, too loud, too sharp. But after a while, it softened. And in that stillness, something shifted. I started waking up without that tightness in my chest. I could breathe in my own home again. I moved through the rooms differently, not like I was dodging questions or stepping around something fragile. I cleaned out the nursery, boxed things up carefully, put them in storage. It hurt more than I expected. Not because I missed her, but because I missed the version of my life I thought was real. But grief is quieter when you're not lying to yourself anymore. I threw myself into work, not as a distraction, but as something I could control. Something honest. I picked up extra contracts, brought on a second team lead, and finally took back the project Tyler had left unfinished. It felt good to see things move forward. Every small one reminded me that I wasn't stuck. I was rebuilding. Not just my house, but myself. People talk. Some of my friends reached out, not knowing what to say. Others avoided me altogether. That was fine. I didn't need explanations. I just needed distance. My parents were supportive, though shaken. My mom cried more than I expected. Not for Megan, for Jacob. For what could have been. For what wouldn't be now. I let her feel that. I let myself feel it too. Weeks passed. Then months. The mess faded into something manageable. I slept. I cooked. I laughed again, not often, but when I did, it felt real. And then, one morning, I met someone. Her name was Claire. She was a project manager for a company we'd partnered with on a commercial renovation. It started professionally: emails, meetings, schedules. She was sharp, direct, had this dry humor that caught me off guard in the best way. We had coffee after a final site walk one day, just to debrief. But we sat there for 2 hours. We talked about work, travel, the worst movies we secretly loved. I didn't feel like I was performing. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I was just me. And she didn't flinch. We started texting. Then dinner. Then more dinners. Nothing heavy. No pressure. She didn't pry. She didn't need a full history. She just asked questions and listened. That alone felt like something rare. I hadn't decided what we were. I didn't need to. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't chasing the next thing. I was just existing honestly, quietly, without lies. And that was enough. Not because I'd forgotten what happened, but because I'd finally stopped letting it define me. It's been over a year since I opened that envelope. Sometimes it still feels like it happened last week, like I could reach out and touch that version of myself, the one sitting at his desk with 1,000 versions of the future cracking apart in his head. Other times it feels like a different lifetime, like the man who lived in that house with Megan and held a baby he thought was his, was someone else entirely. And maybe, in a way, he was. People talk a lot about moving on, but that phrase always bothered me, because I didn't move on. I didn't pack up the memory and pretend it didn't shape me. I didn't erase it. What I did was decide. I decided what I would carry forward and what I would leave behind. That's not moving on. That's moving right. I don't talk to Megan. I don't talk to Tyler. And not out of bitterness, but because some betrayals don't come with second chances. When someone looks you in the face and lies for months, years, when they hand you a life that was never really yours and ask you to build it blindly, they don't get to come back just because the damage is done. They made their choices. I made mine. I heard from a mutual friend that Tyler's business never recovered, that Megan moved back in with her parents, that they tried, for a while, to make it work. I didn't ask for details. That chapter's closed, and I'm not reopening it. Claire and I are still seeing each other. Slowly. Honestly. She knows everything now. I told her the full story one night over dinner, not to scare her off, but because I didn't want to build something halfway again. She didn't look away. She just said, "That couldn't have been easy," and reached for my hand. That was it. No judgment. No pity. Just presence. And that meant more than any grand gesture ever could. I still have Jacob's photo. One from when he was about 4 months old, smiling in a striped onesie, mouth open in a way that made it look like he was telling the world something important. I don't keep it out in the open, but I didn't throw it away either, because I did love him. For as long as I believed he was mine, I gave him everything I had. And I won't pretend that didn't happen. It made me softer. It made me stronger. It made me real. So no, I don't regret ordering that test. I regret needing to. But I'm glad I did. Because the truth, even when it burns, is still cleaner than any lie dressed up to look like love. And if you're reading this, wondering whether you're crazy for feeling like something's off in your life, trust yourself. Not the doubt. Not the fear. But the you beneath all of that. You don't need proof to know when something's wrong. But if you go looking, be ready for the answer. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And when you do, choose peace. Choose clarity. Choose yourself. I did. And I'm not looking back.